Examining wrestling storylines and matches through the eyes of game plans, adjustments, intangibles, and analytics. This is the series. Previously on the series, Punk ran his AEW record to 6-0 following a victory over Eddie Kingston at AEW Full Gear. As 2021 came to a close, Punk would enter the new year at 8-0 in singles competition. The first time he stepped into the ring in 2022, he would have to go to war. Wardlow was like anyone Punk had faced during his AEW run. Powerhouse Hobbs would be the best comparison, but Hobbs lacked big match experience, and the goals for the two men were different. Hobbs entered the match at AEW Rampage Grand Slam, trying to win. Wardlow entered his showdown with Punk on January 12, 2022 episode of Dynamite, trying to destroy him. Winning should be the focus of all wrestlers when they enter the ring. Winning means more money. Winning means championships. Wardlow was handsomely paid by MJF, win or lose, to ensure that MJF's goals were met. There was a bounty on the head of CM Punk. Take him out and make MJF's road to the championship a breeze. Wardlow was about to go headhunting. Punk had stylistic advantages going into this matchup. He was quicker, a much better technician, a far advanced in-ring IQ, and exponentially more big match experience. Punk also proved against Kingston that he was hardened. And while Kingston didn't have the raw power of Wardlow, his fortitude in that bout helped prepare him for anything Wardlow could throw his way. Wardlow wasn't exactly Punk's focus, though. He was a brick wall standing in the way of Punk's short-term goal of defeating MJF. Wardlow was a trap game of sorts, a guy Punk should beat given his advantages, but an easy guy to overlook given who he ultimately wanted to get his hands on. Before the bell rings, Punk is locked in on MJF, who gives instructions to Wardlow. The pre-match dynamic is immediately in play as MJF sets the mission of destruction for Wardlow while Punk has his focus on the wrong man. MJF's track record as a coach is questionable, even fireable, if it wasn't for his own success. He may have been able to lead Wardlow and Shawn Spears to some singles success, but they always faltered when the stakes were raised. The success of FTR is largely contributed to Tully Blanchard, who was the one calling plays for the duo while MJF was nowhere to be found. The bell rings and nothing has changed for Punk. He slides out of the ring to stalk down MJF. Wardlow, literally, stands in his way. This is a mistake by Punk, who has to do a better job of remaining focused on the man in front of him, not the man behind the man in front of him. Punk loses the first lockup as Wardlow shows off his strength, but switches things up on the second lockup, grabbing a headlock. Punk's technical expertise is his biggest in-ring advantage in this match, and he smartly goes to it early. Wardlow powers out of the headlock and blasts Punk down with a shoulder block. Using his power once again, Wardlow backs Punk into the corner, but takes too long to pull back on a strike. Wardlow can throw with power, but this early, Punk has plenty of awareness to move and counter. Wardlow quickly learns from his mistake and stops a combo from Punk with a quick blow to the chest. While Wardlow sacrificed some power, the quickness of the strike allowed it to connect, and given his power overall, there was still plenty behind it. With Punk feeling the effects of the blow and unable to counter, Wardlow remains on the offense and starts putting more behind his strikes. Wardlow once again makes the mistake of taking too long to set things up as Punk evades a corner charge. Punk has immediately shown that if he is given any space by Wardlow, it's too much space, and he's able to move and counter. Though Wardlow doesn't crash into the corner, he turns around and is met with a series of leg kicks. Punk is the quicker striker, and the leg kicks will serve to slow down Wardlow and take away any power. Both men get a little too greedy early on. Punk goes for a GTS, but Wardlow escapes. Wardlow goes for a powerbomb, but Punk scrambles to the outside. Punk's mistake could have been disastrous if Wardlow was able to connect, but he managed to live to fight another round. Wardlow's choice to counter Punk's best shot with his own best shot shows he knows the task at hand. He's not worried about softening him up for victory in this match. He's focused on ending him in prolonged fashion for MJF. During the break, Punk fails to create any sustained offense as Wardlow continues to use his strength, now targeting the back of Punk. Punk's best offense came when he went back to attacking the leg of Wardlow with kicks, but Wardlow found a counter. When Punk left his feet on a springboard, Wardlow caught him and rammed him into the turnbuckle. Punk is clutching his back as Wardlow has honed in on his target. Punk once again counters when Wardlow gives him space, blocking a corner charge by getting his foot up, but instead of trying to ground the big man, he tries a tornado DDT. Wardlow easily tosses him away. As smart as Punk is in the ring, there seems to be a lack of a game plan on his part. It's a credit to Wardlow, who has managed to find a counter every time Punk has tried to sustain any offense, but Punk is making mistakes that we haven't seen from him in his previous bouts. Punk escapes a powerbomb and fires back with a head kick. While this may have been the opening Punk was looking for, it only serves to wake up and upset Wardlow. Maybe the kick lacked some spark due to the state of Punk after the beating he took. Psychologically, this could have been damaging for Punk. However, for the first time in the bout, Punk shows some focus. He smartly stays on the attack, throwing a series of kicks and clotheslines. Wardlow gets rocked as Punk focuses less on precision and more on power. At this point, he's just trying to recapture momentum and score a small victory in a bigger battle. He manages to get Wardlow off his feet with a springboard clothesline, a high-risk move that finally pays off. Punk gets a running knee strike, a staple of his offense, but makes a mistake. Instead of immediately transitioning into the Bulldog, as he's done so many times throughout his career, he stops the flip off MJF. This kind of carelessness is what cost Eddie Kingston against Punk, and now Punk is finding himself in a similar position. MJF has planted himself at ringside and in the head of Punk. The mistake immediately leads to Wardlow hitting his first powerbomb. He would go on to hit 4 more powerbombs, bringing the grand total up to 5. As Wardlow covers Punk, MJF interjects and stops the count. He's not satisfied just yet, and this goes to show the lack of coaching expertise on display by MJF. Because the mission is to destroy and not win, 5 powerbombs is not enough. MJF explicitly states that he wants more. Wardlow shows he's a team player and listens. At the request of MJF, Wardlow hits 2 more powerbombs, and we're now at 7. At this point, Wardlow is simply stat padding, with victory being an afterthought. Punk rolls to the apron following the 7th powerbomb. On one hand, Punk has bought himself some time. On the other hand, the fact that he's moving only means MJF will want more damage done. Wardlow plants Punk with a powerbomb through a table, making it 8 total powerbombs. Wardlow might not like the game plan, but he's following the coach's orders, and Punk is the one suffering because of it. Punk manages to beat a generous 10 count into the ring, which actually upsets MJF because it means Punk is still moving. The job isn't done in his mind. MJF wants more damage done. Wardlow wants a victory, and Punk needs a miracle. MJF is now turning red and is Doc Rivers' horse as he screams at Wardlow to not pin Punk. Instead, he wants another powerbomb. Wardlow is visibly frustrated with the play calling. He's ready to go into victory formation, but MJF wants to run up the score. Punk surprises Wardlow with an inside cradle, shows great technique in hooking his own leg, and manages to hold Wardlow down for the 3 count. It was a Hail Mary by Punk, but it worked. Punk doesn't look like the victor, but not every victory is going to look pretty. Sometimes, you just need to find a way to stay in the match long enough to have one shot at winning. Punk's one shot was the inside cradle. The slow 10 count bought him some time. MJF demanding more power bombs bought him some time. Punk even collapsed down before the inside cradle, which led to Wardlow letting his guard down a bit. He already thought the job was done. Punk going limp gave Wardlow the extra false sense of security. As he begrudgingly went to carry out the play, Punk caught him off guard. Wardlow is breathing heavy after the match. Some of that is frustration, but he also wore himself out after hitting 8 total power bombs to go along with his power offense. Wardlow relies on explosion more than technique. He couldn't explode out of the inside cradle due to Punk's technique and his own exhaustion. Many factors play into any loss. Wardlow could have focused more on cardio. He could have studied tapes, specifically technicians like Bret Hart and how they defeated big men like Diesel. He could have complained about the refereeing and the slow count. Ultimately, this loss comes down to poor coaching. This was by far Punk's worst performance in an AEW ring as he was dominated by Wardlow for the majority of the match. He couldn't sustain any offense, he lost focus far too often, and in all reality, he should have lost. The greats always find a way though, and thanks to coaching mistakes and Punk's ability to find an opening at the right time, mixed with a miracle, Punk found a way. The numbers from our friends at Pro Wrestling Musings show just how dominant Wardlow was when it came to big offense. He landed his best stuff, and he should have won. Though the strikes were even, Wardlow's strikes had more impact. For every counter Punk had, Wardlow managed to find a counter of his own. Wardlow imposed his will, and Punk looked lost for the majority of the match. This victory secured Punk a match against MJF, who had been his target for months and the last roadblock on his journey to the AEW World title. Next time on the series, Punk and MJF meet in Chicago. There was no more hiding for MJF. He finally had to back up all the talk in the ring against the best in the world.